What we do every week here on this show on Sunday nights is the resume ranking. And that is a ranking of the teams that ignores everything that happened before this season. So the only thing that happened or that matters is what happened this season. So if you won the national title last season, that's great. We're not talking about that. If you have had a great year this year, but you haven't played anybody yet, that's a problem too. Because we don't know how good you are until you play somebody. That's where Michigan's running into trouble, because Michigan has been awesome. The how you've played for Michigan is off the charts good. They've dominated everybody. They looked incredible against Nebraska on Saturday. But the who you've played for Michigan is not good. And so we don't really know how to evaluate them. So I'm doing the top 10 resume rankings. You're not going to find Georgia or Michigan in these. So you can get mad if you'd like, Georgia and Michigan fans, but I think probably you understand where I'm coming from on this, that you can kind of play your way in. Like for Michigan, even though the who you've played doesn't get much better until a little bit later in the season, the how you've played may get them in there anyway, because you keep doing this over and over and over again. That counts for something too. I think Washington is a team that we can talk about in that vein. And interestingly enough, Washington struggled-ish for the first time. Not really struggled, but a one possession win in Arizona that wasn't quite as close as 7 points. It was 31-24 win. It always felt like they were safe, but it was closer than what they've had in the past. They were not just blowing people out. So let us go to the resume rank. We will start at number 10. This is the only one I have with a loss in the top 10 in the resume rank, and that is Notre Dame. They needed a 95-yard drive to beat Duke, but that was a great win. They showed that they are very tough against Ohio State in a loss. I realize that there's no such thing as a quality loss, but if you can take Ohio State to the last play, that's better than what most teams can do. Notre Dame plays Louisville this week. Louisville is undefeated. Now, that their who you play does not get them on this list, but if they can win it, they might jump onto this list. Notre Dame needs to win this, needs to keep winning. Notre Dame still has a chance to make the college football playoff, but they got to win out, and they probably got to get a little help. Number 9, Kentucky. The who they've played prior to this weekend didn't tell you much. They play Florida, which had lost to Utah, had beaten Tennessee. And it wasn't just they beat Florida, it was the way they beat Florida. They dominated Florida on the ground. Ray Davis goes for 280 yards rushing. It was a just manhandling of a team that had manhandled Tennessee a couple weeks earlier. So Kentucky at number 9, they go to Georgia this week. If they go win in Athens, they may be number 1 next week. So we'll see how this goes. But this is where Georgia's who you've played gets better. And we'll see where Georgia lands. Like if they beat Kentucky, they're going to land on this list. It's a matter of where at that point. Number 8, Miami. Now that A&M win, the Texas A&M win for Miami continues to look better and better because Texas A&M continues to play better and better. It's the only really good one Miami has. That's why they're not higher. But they do have a stretch coming up where they've got to play North Carolina and Clemson in consecutive weeks. And they also have to play Florida State down the road. So they're going to get tested. We'll know where Miami sits after that stretch with North Carolina and Clemson, and we can probably rank them a lot more accurately. Number 7, Washington State. The Cougars had the week off this week, but on Friday night, they got to watch the team they just beat, Oregon State, beat previously undefeated Utah, and in a pretty dominant fashion. It was 21-7. Utah never really had a chance. Now, granted, Utah is not what it can be if Cam Rising gets healthy, if Brant Kuithe gets healthy, but we don't know when that is. And the fact of the matter is they had beaten Florida and UCLA without those guys. So it's a pretty impressive fact that Oregon State beat those guys. Washington State beat Oregon State and beat Wisconsin, which is not lost again. So got the Cougars there. Number 6, Washington. The who you've played, we're not so sure about yet. But the how you've played has been awesome. Arizona tested them a little bit, but it is a conference road win, just like we talked about with Georgia and Auburn. So Washington continues to be very good. And with Washington, we're going to know because they play number 5, Oregon, on October 14th. Oregon and Washington both have a week off before they meet in Seattle on October 14th. Oregon continues to dominate everybody too. They fell behind Stanford 6-0. They beat Stanford 42-6. So Oregon comes in at number 5. Number 4, Penn State. You know what you're saying? Who'd Penn State beat? Well, Iowa still hasn't lost again, and Penn State beat them 31-0. And that season opening win against West Virginia, we're like, oh yeah, you beat West Virginia, whatever. Neil Brown's getting fired. West Virginia's 4-1. They're 2-0 in the Big 12. They just won at TCU this past weekend. West Virginia might actually be good. So, again, that's why we do this. The resume is the resume. And right now, the teams that Penn State has beaten have been okay. Is Iowa great? Not by any stretch of the imagination. Could Iowa still win the Big Ten West? Yep, sure could. And Penn State beat them 31-0. So that's the thing about this. Number 3, Ohio State, one of the best wins of the season, going to Notre Dame and winning. We'll need to see more. We'll get more. Undefeated Maryland this weekend. That's going to be a fun game. Remember 2018, Ohio State went down there and Maryland scared the hell out of them. Maryland probably should have won that game. There was a 2-point conversion that Maryland didn't get that they should have gotten. And this could be fun. This will be a great test for Ohio State's defense because Taulia Tagovailoa has been fantastic. And we think Ohio State's defense is quite a bit better. We saw them limit Notre Dame, obviously, to 14 points. Duke, pretty similar situation. They limited Notre Dame for most of that game. So how does Ohio State handle an offense that looks pretty explosive? If they can shut the Maryland offense down or at least slow it down, I think that is a very, very good sign for the Buckeyes. Huge opportunity for the Terrapins, though. Number 2, Florida State. The LSU win, does it lose a little luster because they lost to Ole Miss? Maybe. But the Clemson win still looks good. And look, I get Clemson also lost to Duke. I think we all agree that Duke is good. Duke would be just outside the edge of this list. So Florida State now in a position to make a run at the college football playoff. You know, Miami, probably their toughest game left on their schedule, but they've got to play Duke also. But this has been a good run early for Florida State, and now they have a chance to figure some things out, get everything really right before they play Miami. And if they do that, then the next toughest game probably is the ACC championship game, which could be against Miami again, could be against North Carolina, could be against Clemson still, but probably not. Could be against Louisville for all we know. But they will play somebody very good there. Number 1, Texas. I flip-flopped Texas and Florida State this week because that win against Alabama looks even better now that Alabama seems to be figuring some stuff out. Once Alabama decided Jalen Milroe was QB1, they started looking better. Texas beat them with Jalen Milroe playing quarterback. Now, granted, I don't know if the offense was exactly the same as what Alabama is doing right now, but that win was very impressive. And then they handled business against Baylor, and then they handled business against Kansas. It was not the Kansas game we all wanted to see because we wanted to see Jalen Daniels get to play, but unfortunately his back tightened up before the game. That's all right. Texas dominated. Actually, was a little bit sloppy and could have won by quite a bit more. They were dominating in terms of yardage. They did not finish off a lot of things early, but Texas can erase any doubts. They can eliminate any questions by going to Dallas this weekend and pounding Oklahoma. Or if Oklahoma beats Texas, the Sooners hop way up on this list because they've just been very quietly going about their business, but they feel like they've got a pretty good team. We're going to talk to George Stoya from Sooner Scoop later in the show about where the Sooners stand coming out of that Iowa State game, getting ready for Texas, because we all remember the disaster for Oklahoma that was last year's Red River Shootout. I don't think it's going to be like that this year. I think this one's going to be a very competitive game. If Texas wins, they probably further cement their spot right here. But if they lose, I don't think it eliminates them either. because I think you're probably going to see each other again. So this is going to be a very fun week where this ranking could look considerably different next week, considerably different, because Alabama, Texas A&M could affect it. One of those two teams could win and plop themselves here. Georgia, Kentucky, we mentioned. Louisville and Notre Dame, Ohio State and Maryland, all of these games could affect this. So it looks weird, right? When you see that, the top 10, and then you compare it to, say, the AP poll and the coaches poll. I know it does. But by the end of the season, they're going to look pretty similar. It's just a different way of going about it. I think it's a more honest way of going about it because we're just not using any preseason hype to prejudice our ranking. So we will try and see how that goes going forward. I imagine there will be quite a few more fairly wild swings as we get going. Thank you so much for watching. Just a reminder, subscribe to this channel right here so you never miss an episode of Andy Staples On 3. And oh, by the way, watch all the other great videos on the On 3 Sports YouTube channel.